Hello and welcome to the Rntky Mindful Mental Health miniseries. I'm here with MJ Coppola and I'm Katie Moran. I hope you are all having a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we are doing an 11-part series, miniseries, and we are gonna have each episode come out Tuesdays and Thursdays from Thanksgiving to New Year's Day. So I hope you guys are ready. I just want to give a disclaimer. We are not mental health professionals. This is for educational purposes only, and we talk about things from our own perspective. We are mental health advocates, we are poets, creatives. So we just want to share what we've learned with other people, and just remember that there's no replacement for therapy. There's no replacement for crisis lines and things like that. So if you are in crisis, please contact your nearest crisis line, and you can Google suicide prevention lines by me, crisis text lines, things like that. There's different options in different states. So hello, MJ.
Hi there. I'm very excited about this. We have a lot to share, and I think, man, I wish, not that I wish I had this, but it's almost like when the idea came up, I was like, oh man, maybe this could be an annual thing. You know, it's kind
Mhm.
of like I look back and I'm like, man, I could have used this like 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah,
So
that's actually this comes from, it's called Rntky and it's called Reasons Not to Kill Yourself. And the first iteration of this was a blog post that was 11 reasons to keep going. And I felt 11 reasons to not kill yourself was a little bold, but then we decided to go with it later on in the project's iterations. And for me, I was in a good place and I just wanted to create something that would remind me of all the reasons that I hold on, and all the reasons that when I'm feeling sad that I would keep going. And actually, after I wrote it, I had this like kind of crisis, and I just like really felt suicidal and impulsively suicidal and or compulsively. And I read the blog post and it really helped me to see why it was important to keep going and to not let that overcome or consume me. So it is something that for me, I was very grateful to have it.
yeah, I also have something similar, but it more started off like a letter to myself in my phone that was like, hey, when you're feeling like this, click on this and read this stuff or watch these videos. And it really did help me. But I really didn't make that until I felt like I wanted to stay.
Mhm.
It was like definitely not during the holiday times. It was, sometime in the summer when I was like, somebody else was struggling and I was like, oh man, like I remember how this feels and I know it's coming back. So I should really like be forward thinking about it. And then I created my own little, you know, thing that I could go back and look and be like, okay. And there was months like that I would go back to that like daily, go back to the reminders and that note that was like, you're worth keeping going, and pictures of my daughter and my family and my friends in the community. And it really did help put me in a mindset where I was like, I'm not alone. I totally got this. And even if I said it and didn't feel it all the way, which we can go back to, because that's definitely something that I feel like a lot of people feel. But yeah, it definitely helped. And now that we're talking about the reasons, I really love the fact that it's a bold, like it's not roundabout. Like when you write a poem or you write something and you try to come up with like a title for that thing, right? Or like if you're making an art piece and you try to come up with a name, you're trying to come up with something that's like, or at least for me, I'm trying to come up with something that's obvious, but not going to tell the whole story so that you can go into it and like interpret it for yourself. But something like Rintiki, it's like reasons not to kill yourself. And when you're in that space, that mindset, it's the guessing game is like not great. So having that be the title, it almost like forces you to go, okay, I don't have to, like we just talked about, like brain fog. And like when I'm in that space, I don't want to have to guess. I don't have like the capacity to like try to maybe creatively think my way to something. I want somebody to just tell me that everything's going to be fine, even if it's me. You know what I mean? Um, so I really always liked the title of it because it is bold, but it's bold in the best way possible. It's like, it gets right to the point and it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, and I love how you mention like one of your reasons is your daughter, because when I first created these, I didn't say anything about like specifically like people who you care about and people who care about you. Well, I did say a little part about that, but I wanted to be as least triggering to someone who really had like kind of like felt like they had no options, felt like they were a burden, and I wanted to like speak to them, like especially when we talk about nature, and nature never judges, because sometimes people are like bullied to the point or abused to the point that they feel so bad about themselves that they feel like they are a burden. And this was really created specifically for people like in a way that wouldn't trigger them if they felt like the people in their life who were supposed to care for them had let them down or abandoned them. So I think when you think about your own reasons, it's so important. I encourage everyone to write down your reasons, and a lot of the times that is the people you love. And there is one about someone cares for you, and I think that's so important to recognize, even if it's you caring for yourself or us caring about you in a kind of like distant kind of way, or if I know you well, a close way. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I've received criticism online about, like, someone said it was like so self-absorbed, all of the reasons, and it was very intentional because a lot of people, sometimes the people they love are lost, and sometimes the people they love are abusive, and it's just something that I wanted to put out there that wasn't triggering. So it was like, if someone has been through everything and is self-isolating, like these are the reasons they could hold on to, and these are the reasons that wouldn't make them feel worse. So
Hmm.
that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and thank you for explaining that, because I do think that everybody has their own reasons, and I think it's important to make your own, like one of your own Rentiki like lists.
Yes.
I think that's super important, and also one for if you want to say the general, a general list like this, you can really make it your own. Like use it as a guide to add those things. And for me, my daughter makes a list because, like I know my existence is important for her mental health. So even if it's not for me, it's for her, and that's important to me. But there are definitely times where I feel like a burden, and even that isn't always enough. So having
Mhm.
a list that hits multiple areas is great because you're not always like in the right, the right is like not the right word for it. It's like you're not always in that mental state, especially after you've been triggered or go down a rabbit hole or something. So
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that what someone sees when they're in a good place isn't always what they see. It could be the exact situation, but they're in a place that isn't that healthy. And I think it's so important to recognize that it could be the exact same situation, but the person's internal state is different. And whether that be from depression or suicidal ideation, it's important to recognize that we don't all see the world in the same way. And sometimes things can be triggering, like thinking about the relationship with people who love us could be triggering when we're in a darker place.
right. That is a very, very good point because yeah, I have definitely been in those places before where it feels like overwhelm, basically, to have that as a reason almost. Because you're just not thinking the same way. You're right. So
Yeah, so the reason today is you matter. So even if you feel like you don't matter, you do matter. Reminding yourself that you matter is the first step in rekindling a sense of purpose or passion for your life and the work you can do. You belong here. You really belong here. So that first started off from a blog post, and then we were doing a project with a group of people from a self-development community that we're a part of, and it turned into a community on Discord, Rntky, and it's a suicide prevention Discord. Something that we love to do is run gratitude challenges, and you just go in there and there's a section, today I'm grateful for, and you share what you're grateful for. And I've heard a lot of people say that even if they don't participate, they don't turn off their notifications because it brightens their day to see other people share what they're grateful for, which I think is just so lovely. The first gratitude challenge we had, I remember I would be on calls, like group calls and communities I'm a part of, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, you're a Katie from the gratitude challenge," and I was like thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I've ever met this person, but they said that they read every day what people were grateful for, and it just reminded them to be grateful. And it's just so important to recognize that you can be impacted by something even if you don't participate in it, just by watching it and just by reading what people are grateful for. And I think that's one of the most powerful parts of gratitude challenge, because I've had days where it was hard to be grateful, and I went in there and I saw what other people were grateful for, and I was like, oh, you know what, there is something I could be grateful for. And I've had days where I was really in a bad place and just felt sad and was thinking negative thoughts, and then I pushed myself to write something I was grateful for, and that changed the state of how I was seeing things, and it changed my perspective, and I reframed what the situation that I was in, and it was easier for me to kind of like take back my power, take back control, and feel just more optimistic about what I was going through.
yeah, I have to say, as a practice of like being in more control of my electronics, I normally don't have any notifications come through for any of the social media, my emails off, like text messages, pretty much it. But I do have my notifications on for that group because of that reason, because there are days like that I'll go an entire day almost without feeling gratitude, or I'll just forget to do my practice, or I'm not in the mood for it, and I see it come through. I see the people who are like consistently on there, and it makes me feel like, oh yeah, that's right, like there are other people out there, and I should go read those so that I could see, like, what's going on there today. And it just makes me feel like one part of a community, but it also makes me feel like it reminds me that you can find gratitude in everything, but you don't necessarily always have to feel like that immense. Like there are whole weeks sometimes where I hesitate to say like fake it till you make it, but that's like the way that everybody kind of phrases it, so I'll use it. But it's this like you're just going through the process and the motions, and the gratitude practice for me was that. But then I can look back, like I have a whole notes folder on my phone of gratitude, like pictures that I've taken to remind myself of the beauty in the world. And I might not feel it on that day, but there is days where I go back to that and I'm like, I'm really grateful that I recorded that for that day and took the moment, even if it was subconscious, to take that, because it wasn't just about the gratitude that day. It was about showing up for myself, even when I didn't feel like showing up for myself, which has been tremendously helpful. Um, so that I guess is another way to kind of look at it. But having the notifications come up, like, um, it really has been like a blessing to have it show up to remind me like, oh yeah, I could like I'm gonna go in and like see what everybody's doing today and like how everybody's doing. And it's not always like happy, but it's I don't yeah, it's great to have. I just don't even know how else to describe it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's something that's so beautiful. And something that I love about the communities, and it's true in Creativeville when we do creative sprints too, and that's my Discord for creatives, is that even if you feel like you can't get to that place where you're creating that day or get to that place where you're grateful that day, someone else is. And I feel like that's kind of like holding space for you. And it's like, it just shows you that it's okay if I can't get to this place today because someone else is doing it and I could do it tomorrow. And I feel like in a way, it almost gives you permission to come back to it when you're ready because someone is like holding that space for you and that space is there the next day. And it's like, it's not so much about feeling like you're contributing every day, but it's about like feeling that the energy is there and you're welcome to contribute when you feel that you match that energy. And
Mm,
I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about in community, but I think that really is like a true power of community is that you hold space and it's almost this container, I would say specifically for healing, and for growth. Because I think a lot of the times when, like, if you're doing your own gratitude practice and say you don't do it one day, then a lot of the times you'll be like, oh, I didn't do it yesterday, I don't have to do it today. And you get out of that routine of doing it. And that's what I mean by a community holding space, because other people are still continuing to do it. So it's not really about showing up every day, but it's about showing up for yourself when you can and having other people show up when you can't.
yeah, it's that almost I hesitate to use the word accountability, but it's kind of dancing in there a little bit, so I figured I'd use it. But it's that, but holding space. It's exactly it's this because I have that same like, oh, I didn't work out today, or I didn't do my gratitude challenge, or I didn't write today. So, there's nobody there to be like, it's just you and yourself to hold that space. And maybe I'm wrong with this, but I feel like we all have areas in our life where we're better at holding ourselves accountable for things than others. And if you struggle with your mental health, then having a community that holds that space for you is like a life changer, because even if you don't do those things every day, but you turn on your notifications or you show up when you're ready to show up, that will be there when you're ready. And having that is like, it's a form of relief because you know that subconsciously there's gonna be someone there to hold that space when you're ready to do that. Um, Even if you don't show up every day, even if you're struggling to do your gratitude challenge every day. And like I said, for me, at least the notifications come up on my phone for that one that like I'll never shut them off for that group, because one, if someone is there that needs help, it's nice to have the notification that you can go in and be like, I'm here for you. Even if all you can do is go, you're not alone. And the other part of it is the other people are showing up for themselves. It kind of motivates you to also show up for yourself, even if you're seeing those notifications. And even if you feel like you can't for the day, someone else is doing it. It makes you feel like, okay, that is there as an option. So when I'm ready, I can show up for that thing.
Yeah, and I feel like it also like reframes your mind. Like the more you think about gratitude, the more you see it in your life. And I do participate, so I'm not sure if this is true, but I would just imagine that seeing other people say what they're grateful for, you would think about the things you're grateful for just more throughout the day than if you didn't have that notification about gratitude.
Yeah, it's a I won't say it's a constant reminder, but it is a reminder. It's like someone saying, like, "Don't think of the color purple," and, like, duh, you're gonna think of the color purple because obviously they said it. So, I see "I'm grateful today for," and I'm like, it's almost automatic. It, like, happens, your brain just does it. What am I grateful for?" Or sometimes someone will say something that I'm like, "Well, that's a really interesting thing to, like, be grateful for," and then I'll click and go into it, and then I'll end up reading a bunch of them and thinking about my own things that I've not thought about I was grateful for before. And it's I know that this man isn't for everyone, but one of the things that Jordan Peterson always says is that action heals a lot. And for me, that's almost it's not forced action, but it's like a gentle nudge in a direction to create an action in yourself of um, thinking about gratitude even when like you naturally maybe wouldn't do it because of the state of mind you're in. So it's creating this loop of action that in turn kind of makes you show up for yourself and creates an action somehow. At least for me it does. So
Yeah, and kind of like back to the reasons and the idea that you matter is this idea of like inherent worth. And when I first started coaching, this is something I would have all of my clients do. I just suggest to them like going into like their bathtub and like thinking about like how their worth is inherent, because I think a lot of the times when we're like in certain aspects of our life, like we think like, oh yeah, like my worth comes from my productivity, or like my worth comes from the stuff I wear. And I think like when we cut that barrier and it's just like we're alone with ourselves, like none of that stuff matters. And it's like not about what clothes we're wearing, it's not about what watch we have, it's not about our phone, it's not about our possessions. And I think that's something that can really change people's perspective. And just kind of like when you take a bath and like if you put Epsom salt in there, just this idea that you're not really doing anything specific, but just that like rest in itself can like be productive. Not that our worth comes from that, but just this idea that like even in doing nothing, like there's something that's still happening. And I think it's so important to remember that rest is such an important part of any type of productivity, like rest and restoration. And this idea that like even if we don't do anything, we still have this inherent worth. And I had a client who had a really hard time kind of like believing this or like conceptualizing it or feeling like it was true. And I said to them, imagine you have a child and you've never met that child before, obviously before they're born, and then they're born, and suddenly you have all these feelings and this love toward this child that you've never met before, they've never done anything for you, and you would say that they have worth even though they've never earned it. And just this idea that that's true for all of us, we don't have to do anything to earn our worth. And it's so important to recognize that just in our humanity there's worth, and that it is inherent. And inherent means that just that we don't have to earn it, there's nothing we have to do to get worth. But I do think it is part of the inner work to get to a point where you recognize your worth. And I think you do have to kind of like earn your self-respect so that you trust and believe that you are worthy of the things you want. And for me, worthiness always comes back to authenticity. And I always say that like my definition of authenticity is showing up as you are worthy, and like believing you are worthy. And a lot of the times when people say like I have this authentic voice online and I'm genuine, and it just always seems like I'm me. And for me, that is like kind of like showing up, because like I will like be vulnerable because I feel like I can put myself out there and I am worthy, even if this is true, or even if that is true. It's also true that I have self-worth. It's also true that I'm worthy of the things I desire, and that everyone is.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And I one of my biggest values is self-truth, or authenticity, if you will. And when I struggled with this in the beginning of that very conscious journey to be the most authentic version of myself, I was like, what does that mean? Because the version of me 10 years ago is not the same version of me, but I feel like I was being as authentic as I could at that moment. And I want to point out for people who also have maybe struggled with that one, with that as well, that authenticity is basically like, to me, showing up as the most truthful to yourself version of you in that moment, because we all are on our journeys of healing and changing, or like peeling back layers of maybe society, or things that, and we'll get into this like later on in the series about, the voices that aren't necessarily ours, peeling back those and noticing those things in our lives. And that's all like, it's the spiral path, right? It's this like, this, if we're on this path together, all of us, like Rumi says, like we're all walking each other home, like we're all on different roads. Sometimes we're constantly moving, whether, we want to or not, unfortunately. But without getting too much in the weeds, where you are right now is the most wonderful version of you right now. And showing up for that version of yourself, knowing, there's a quote, I'll have to find it, but I have it on my phone to randomly come up on like once a month. And it goes something like, you are perfect the way you are, and there is always room for more perfection. Something along those lines, where it's like, you're beautiful the way you are, and there's always room for more. Like it's not this box that gets filled and that's it. It's an ever expanding box of love for yourself and authenticity and showing up. And it's okay to be a different person today than you were 10 years ago. So without, because I could go way deeper, but I'll leave it at that for now. That for me, going back to it, authenticity, me mattering, is me saying, today I am going to be the most truthful version of the person I am today, and be gentle about it, be gentle with myself if I happen to not, because even that part of me that doesn't want to show up for the versions that I feel like I am today is still me. It's still the version of me today. And tomorrow I could do something different.
I love that. And that reminds me that I think we should share parts of our own story.
Mm.
So for me, when I felt like I didn't matter, I was in college. It was after I had been sexually assaulted, and I just couldn't really bear with the pain of it. I had PTSD from it, and I still do. And I became suicidal, and I had 8 suicide attempts in the span of 3 years. And I just felt like I didn't matter, like nothing I did mattered. I felt like I had no purpose. I felt like I was a burden, and all these things were felt true to me, and I just couldn't see past the pain. And a lot of the time I just thought there was nothing waiting for me on the other side of my pain, and I thought my pain would last forever, and I thought my pain would get worse. And something that I always make a point to say is that even when the pain gets worse, even when things get worse, life is still worth living. And I think there's this idea a lot of people project, is that things get better, and the truth is sometimes they get worse. And for me, when I was suicidal, things got a lot worse for a long time, and they didn't get better for a while. And the thing is, things never become perfect, but your perspective can change, and you can see that the pain you're stuck in it doesn't have to last forever. And even when there's new pain, that you're stronger than whatever you face. And for me, that was something that was really transformational. And I think specifically my books were something like, I had these ideas to write books, and my ideas like really kept me alive. And I felt like the only purpose I had was to write these books. And I really, every time I had a suicide attempt and it failed, I thought to myself, well, maybe I have to write those books. And it was such a small thing at the time, but it's such a big part of my life now. I am a creativity coach. I also now write books, and I'm writing one of my manuscripts now. I've self-published 3 already. And I'm working on the one that I had the idea for a very long time. And I am so excited to like share it with people and to be working on it. And it's just so special to me. And when I was suicidal, I really felt like a monster, and I felt like I was dehumanizing myself, and I didn't see myself as worthy or of having self-worth or even self-respect. And I remember seeing the play Elephant Man, and it was starring Bradley Cooper, and it's about the real life story of Joseph Merrick, who was like a deformed person, and he was dehumanized and abused and mocked for most of his life. And a physician helped kind of like change that, and it was just so beautiful. And I saw that like we're all lovable, and that there's purpose within all of us, and that no one is a monster, even if they feel dehumanized by other people, and that's not a reason to dehumanize ourselves.
Yeah. I yeah, I can relate to the dehumanizing actually. Um, and that story with the Elephant Man play, like I think I've seen that play once, but it's a very powerful. It is powerful. Um, for sure. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
movie.
I think maybe that's one of the things that I saw, the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, even just the trailer for that movie is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to that, like, we have inherent worth. Like, we don't have to do anything. Even if society doesn't necessarily believe that what we have is, you know, um, in their eyes, we don't fit. We still have that worth by existing. We don't have to do anything, like you were saying earlier. So, um, my own, I tend to tell my story a little broadly. So I've never had full on attempts. I've always been graced with, um, I will call it distractions or um, disruptions during those episode moment. One of the last ones was in 2019. It was December, so it was a really, really hard year for me. And I went through a divorce, and I had pretty much lost, I was starting over, basically, all over, period. And I was sitting there alone. And I remember the very next day after the episode, I happened to pull myself out. My dog literally like jumped on the bed, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed and, you know, see how I feel in the morning. I made a decision. I think there's an episode of a TV show that I cannot remember right now where he was like, I decided that suicide is always an option. And that was how I got myself through that. I was like, all right, it sucks today, but it's always an option. I can come back to it if I need to. And that was my last episode. The very next day, I remember walking through the woods with my dog and thinking how enormously different my mindset was the very next day. And I remember saying, I wonder, like, how much I've lied to myself about how much emotions I take on as like the absolute truth. Like each emotion has to be felt wholeheartedly and taken in as truth. And it was like the beginning of me realizing that, like we kind of discussed earlier, that like those voices, those ideas are not always yours. And there's a lot of things that go into my episodes. Like I've been diagnosed with PMDD, and that being diagnosed with that makes me, start to track like my emotional states throughout each day, the cycles and all of that. It goes into a lot. But that last time made me realize just how much in my entire life, from when I was a child going through the not so nice things in my childhood to current state day, that this is why I'm so, one of the current huge values of mine is authenticity, because I would really like those voices, or that voices are kind of, whatever, but those ideas to be more mine than less mine, if that makes sense. And so for me, that's kind of like a broad version of my story. Again, I was always kind of graced with the distraction. That one happened to be like one of the last episodes I've ever had that I was like right at the brink of like, I can't do this anymore. I can't burden everybody with this like cycle of psychotic episodes like over and over. But just the fact that like the very next day I felt like the sky opened and the sun came out, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, how can I make this more even? And even to this day, I will say it's not necessarily more even, but I remember, because one, I've started to make a list, we're doing the things, right? Even when I have a hard time remembering that the sun will come out tomorrow, like the song says, that I have a reminder that those things will happen. And that's like the first step. That was literally one of the first steps to really getting there.
Yeah, what I love about what you said there is this idea that the negative thoughts aren't really our own, and sometimes we like internalize the negative things people say about us or to us, the criticism. And I think that's so important to recognize. And Gary Vee talks a lot about this, is that negative voice in your head isn't your own. It came from something external. And just like remembering that. And for me, it's really that we are not defined by the way people treat us. And whether that's from abuse or bullying or anything that really just like impacts us, like it's so important to let that stay with the person that it belongs to. And I have this saying in one of my poems: their pain was never meant for me. And just this idea that sometimes we feel like when people hurt us, that we have to take on that pain and that it has to be a weight that we carry. But that's just not true. A lot of times when people hurt us, it really has nothing to do with us. It's their pain. And a lot of people in pain, I think they try to lash out to have other people feel that pain for them. And I think sometimes the healthiest thing we could do is recognize the pain doesn't belong to us, and that we don't have to take that on, and that we can hear negative thoughts, we can hear criticism, we could even experience being hated and having people comment and send hate toward us, and we don't have to make that our own, and we don't have to have that be a story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And I think that's so important to recognize, and that even if people treat you like you're worthless, you are not worthless. You do matter, and your well-being matters. And sometimes it's going through those things and it's facing adversity that really allows you to be there for other people. And that's what I love about the suicide prevention community we have, is that so many people have like faced adversity. So many people have been through, whether it's depression or suicidal ideation, or have known someone who experienced it. We all have this like reverence for life, which I think is something that is so beautiful. And I think everyone in there just wants everyone to know that they're not alone. And like you said, like sometimes it's not so much what you say, it's just being there, that someone could kind of like vent something. And it's not always that you solve someone's problem for them, because I don't think that's anyone's role, but it's that they know that someone's there, and they know that someone's been through something. Might not be the same situation, but it's that same feeling, like whether it's hopelessness or helplessness, and just knowing that people can be suicidal. And I've experienced this myself. I was suicidal. I even attempted suicide, and now I'm grateful to be alive. And I think a lot of the times we don't hear people say that. We don't hear people say that you can feel hopeless and then have so much hope and share hope with other people, like thousands of people. And I think about this sometimes because I read a lot of content about it, and I'm working on projects around it. And I just think, like, when I was like in college and I was suicidal and I was like locked in my room, I locked myself in my room, and I would just like be reading things, and I felt so alone. And to think that in my aloneness, that's what allows for me to connect with so many people now. And it's crazy. It's like thousands of people. And just like the idea that aloneness really is what brings me to solidarity with so many people now. And you just never know what's going to happen next. And I have this video where I talk about like everything I've been through, and the good and the bad, and just like this idea that like going through the bad also gets you to the good. And the good, experiencing the good, doesn't mean there's not going to be more bad. It just means that it's all worth it.
Yeah, it's somebody had pointed out, who was a therapist or teacher at some point, that and I'll never forget this, that is like, you will experience depression, probably not all of your life, but at some points in your life, it's gonna happen. It's how you handle those moments. Are you gonna get lost and drown in them, or are you gonna show up for yourself in those moments and experience them kind of like with yourself? And I started this practice when I was feeling those feelings, where I would pretend that there is a version of me that kind of like, you know, when you see double vision, like another version of you kind of like floats away from yourself. And I still use this practice to this day, where I pretend that there's a version of myself that floats out and is like the best version of myself, and comes and like truly comforts me through it, saying like, look, you're not this person always. Today you are, and it's okay to do that. It's okay to be that. It's okay to feel those things. But we are all like rivers and oceans, where like we're not stagnant. And that's so beautiful. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't always mean that the depression or the sadness or those terrible things will never happen again. But that happens. And also, if that can happen, so can the good stuff too. So it's really been a life-changing practice to remember that there is always a version of myself that can show up for me at any given moment. And that it's not like, what did my friend say? This is death, you know, like your heart monitor has to do this. Like that's what a heart monitor does. That's what life does. Like, so this is death, this is good.
Mm-hmm.
And so Yeah, just remember, we're heart monitors, not flatline.
Yeah, that reminds me of like in spirituality, like the idea of the higher self. And I don't know where it comes from, but it's called the witness. And like this idea that like when you meditate, like your thoughts, you're not really like you're not really the person having these thoughts, but you're the person like witnessing these thoughts. And this idea that like you don't have to like take things on, and going back to this idea that when you have negative thoughts you don't have to like internalize them, or when people say negative things to you, you don't have to internalize it, and like you're not the way people treat you, like that's not your truth. And I think this is something that's so important because this is something that comes out on Thanksgiving. So a lot of the times people have that negative voice from their family, and it could be very challenging over the holidays to spend time with your family and to kind of like feel like it's an obligation for some people, especially if you're struggling with your mental health, because the truth is when you're struggling with your mental health, usually what you just want to do is be alone. And sometimes it could feel very negative or trapping, and I just want to like address that. Like if there's anything that you experience this holiday season, like whether it's like a negative comment or something that is insulting or something that you're holding on to, or like again, this is such a big topic, but this idea of comparison and comparing yourself to like whether it be like just anyone, like anyone who other people are comparing you to, or you comparing yourself to really your to other people, is so important to recognize that that's not where your worth comes from, and that you don't have to hold on to that. And again, like thinking about like being that witness, like you can recognize that you're having this thought about comparing yourself to someone, and then you can let it go and just have it not become the story you tell yourself, because no one is going through what you're going through, and no one feels exactly the way you feel. No one has the exact same mindset as you. And it's so important that you recognize that you matter, you have value, you have worth, and that no one can ever take that away from you, whether it's through abuse, bullying, anything you experience, that does not take it away from you. And you don't have to do anything to earn that. It's so important that you recognize that. And in terms of mindset, I just want to share that you can have the mindset that your life can get better and you can get better, and that can empower you. And I know a lot of times when you feel hopeless or helpless, it can feel like that's permanent. And I just want to remind you, there's this book by Carol Dweck on mindset, and who you are today isn't who you will always be. You can change your mindset to like who you are, and you can make changes in your life, but also you can change your own mindset, and that can be an immediate perspective and shift the way you see yourself, shift the way you see your life, and just know that no one can ever take your worth away from you, no matter what you've been through, and that it belongs to you and that you belong in this world.
Yeah, that book is so powerful. Just the thought that you can be a person who likes yourself, is, I can say from experience that years and years ago, I didn't think I would ever be able to be a person who liked spending her own like time with myself. Like if I was a twin, that I would actually enjoy spending time with myself. Um, but we can choose, just like it doesn't, I know it doesn't feel like it a lot of times, but we literally can choose to focus on the things that make us like ourselves better. Um, and I want to say that I have had many, many holidays with people, that I, family members that I didn't really like, or, being in situations I didn't want to be in. But it felt obligated because, as we do, we feel obligated to do those things. And one of the things that got me through this was being an observer, not an absorber. And as a person who identifies as myself as an empath, that was a really hard shift for me, because I felt like if I wasn't absorbing other people's uh, negative states or even positive states, then who the heck was I? Right. And I decided one time to sit and become the people watcher, not the person who speaks and engages more. I was engaging less and became the observer. And I would observe not only my own mental thoughts as it happened, but everybody else at the same time. And it started off as like a challenge to myself to say like, okay, if I was making a movie of this day, what would it be like? And I played that little game, and it can start off like that, however it needs to, but it ended up being that I really do remind myself on a regular basis that I don't have to absorb those things. I can observe them. And that's all I have to do. I don't have to take it on. In that same respect, that's a mindset shift that you can choose to have, or choose to try to start. And even if it starts off like, okay, let's play a game today. Like maybe there is someone in your family that you could be like, okay, how many times can Aunt Carol say the F bomb? You know what I mean? Like even if it starts off that way, like it's more like turning it into something more positive, um, to start is a really good way to shift into positive mindset. Um, so that's just for me, like how it started, with at least with holiday things, like having to feel like obligated to be there. I'm like, well, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to at least try to not take it home with me because I don't want to. And so that's my little advice for that particular thing, for the
If
mindset shift.
there's if there's one thought you'd like to leave everyone with today, what would it be?
I want to say that in order to change, we need to change, and that can be so beautiful. Um, that can be so beautiful because that means that we don't have to be a version of ourselves that we don't like, and that we don't have to do anything, like you were saying, in order for that to happen. We can simply be the observer or whatever. And even that, you just are just being born. You're great. So,
Yeah, my last thought is just that you are not a burden, and just reminding everyone that if you are suicidal, if you are depressed, that there are people out there who train their whole lives to help people who are in that situation, to help people who feel that way, to help them get out of it, and that there are people who train to help people. So just remember that, and people who devote their whole careers, their whole lives to these things, and that you are not alone, and that you matter. You really do matter. So next week is going to be Your Life Has Meaning. So I can't wait to share that with you. I'm wishing everyone that idea comes easier to them, that they have worth, and that it is inherent and they don't have to do anything to earn it.
yes, you're a beautiful human. So.